What's up, guys? So back with another video for this week, and in today's video we're going to be talking about the concept of nutrient timing, and we're going to be looking at the post-workout period, and actually we'll be discussing how important it is or maybe isn't in relation to helping you achieve your goals. So firstly, if we take a little look at the concept of nutrient timing, if we give you a definition. So if you guys think of nutrient timing as the consumption of nutrients, so food, in and around the exercise bout, so be it beforehand, during and after, that's going to help bring about those physical adaptations which you're training for, so be it improvements in strength or gains in lean body mass and muscle tissue, or whatever it is you're training for. So that period, can it be used to emphasize your results further? Now, I'm sure we've all heard or been told about this post-workout period, and the hypothesis of it goes something like this. You have a very narrow window of opportunity post-training, so the anabolic window, and probably people recognise it as something which varies from maybe 30 minutes to 45 minutes to an hour. Maybe some of you guys have heard ridiculous things where it's even less. But you have this kind of narrow window of opportunity to ingest the nutrients you require to fuel your body further. If you miss this window, this narrow window of opportunity, essentially you miss or you compromise your gains. That's what that hypothesis states. And the problem with that, guys, is besides the fact that it's a bit OTT, is it kind of creates this shock and fear factor that if you don't get something in the body, or you don't ingest your post-workout shake within 7 seconds of finishing your last set of reverse curls in a squat rack, don't even get me started, it kind of creates shock and fear. So, you see these people in the gym, and they kind of immediately, after finishing their last rep, they've got their post-workout shake in the bag, they off to the water fountain and fill it up, and they inhale it within however many seconds of finishing their last rep, in fear that they're going to lose their gains or they're going to waste their workout. That's kind of the basic concept of that post-workout period and why people take post-workout shakes on. So let's take a look at this post-workout period, and let's take a look at, is there this window of opportunity? Now, the simple answer is yes, there is a window. But, and it's a big but, is that it's not as short and narrow as people claim, or maybe you thought it was. It's not 15 minutes or 30 minutes or 45 minutes. Essentially your muscles are, say, sensitized to the effects of anabolism from protein, potentially for up to 24 hours, maybe even longer. And that could be dependent on the type of training you undertake as well. But for the most part, guys, we're talking about strength training, resistance training, lifting weights. But also in terms of the relevance and importance of that post-workout period, you've got to acknowledge the context of the rest of the day for the individual. So if people have been consuming sufficient protein and carbohydrates and fats, so macros, throughout the day, the relevance of the post-workout period probably diminishes a little bit or somewhat. Most of us train in a fed state. As we go into training, we've probably had 1, 2, 3, however many meals, depending on the time of when we train. And also you've got to realise that obviously when we food, it takes time for the circulating level of nutrients in the blood to peak. That can take up to 1 hour, dependent on kind of the size of the meal and also the composition of the meal. So how much protein, how much carbs, how much fats. But the anabolic effects of eating a meal can last for up to anything from 3 to maybe 6 hours. So, if you're going into training in a fed state, and you had sufficient nutrients beforehand, that post-workout period is probably not as important as having something within 5, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. You've covered your basis by consuming food beforehand, and therefore you can kind of relax a little post-workout, have a shower, get changed, go home, and then get some dinner on. If you're going in a fasted state to training, then probably that post-workout period then becomes slightly more important, because we want to cover our basis by making sure that we've got nutrients circulating in the blood, so especially perhaps in a post-workout period. So for most of us guys, in real world application, most of us would have gone into training in a fed state, so therefore you know, acknowledging or thinking that there's this narrow window of opportunity, it's probably a bit unrealistic, and it's essentially not needed. So I also wanted to briefly speak about the makeup of these kind of post-workout concoctions that people make. You know, because somebody might tell you that you need a load of carbs, or you need really fast-acting carbs, or you need to spike insulin. Um, so if you are going to have a shake, the presence of whey protein will spike insulin, so that's that covered. So the question is, do we really need a load of carbs to help replenish muscle glycogen? So strength training by nature is somewhat muscle glycogen depleting, but it's not massively. So, and also you've got to acknowledge that your next training session isn't probably going to be for 24 hours. You know, most of us only train once a day, so your next training session won't be for as minimum 24 hours. So you have a whole day to eat carbohydrates, if indeed you require carbohydrates, to top up, replenish your glycogen stores. Therefore, that post-workout period where people say you need however much, it's kind of negated. You know, you've got enough time to replenish muscle glycogen via just normal food. So the composition of kind of a post-workout shake is perhaps a bit more relevant to people who train multiple times per day, because, you know, if you consider endurance athletes who might train 2-3 times a day in multiple disciplines, you know, the need for them to replenish glycogen stores a little quicker than someone who trains once a day is obviously a lot higher. Therefore, you know, the presence of carbs in their post-workout shake, if indeed they have one, is a little bit more important. But for the most part, guys, you know, as we said before, you've got to acknowledge the context of the rest of the day. So my advice to you is look at when you train, look at what you eat beforehand, and then look at the relevance of the post-workout period. So if you look at your day, and because of the fact that you've had multiple meals beforehand, you think that that post-workout period isn't perhaps as important as you once believed it was, what should instead be the priority? So the biggest one is always going to be the total amount of food you eat over the course of a day. So the macronutrient intake is going to be number one. And therefore meeting protein requirements, carb requirements, fat requirements over the course of 24 hours is going to be more substantial than acknowledging that post-workout period and then looking at the specifics of how much you have and whatever else. So making sure that you have a sufficient amount of feedings through the day to help you meet protein goals and carb goals and fats goals. You know, 3 is always a fairly decent number. 4 is, if it's manageable. 4 is it's whatever suits, whatever you prefer to do. And also you've got to remember that, you know, if you're eating multiple times a day, as we said, because of the fact that it takes time for nutrients to peak in the blood, you're going to have crossover of nutrients, you know, from one meal to the next. So, you know, don't worry too much about that post-workout period in isolation. Worry more or concern yourself more with what you're doing over the course of 24 hours and over the course of a day, and get that in line first of all. So there we have it, guys. We've spoken about nutrient timing and kind of the post-workout period, but it's quite a controversial topic, and it's one where there's a lot of myths and a bit of bro science battered about, and I'm sure you've all heard some corkers, or you must do this, or you must not do this, or whatever. But I hope this video has helped give you an idea as to when it's relevant and when it's not relevant. And I've always said it's kind of ironic that the people who need it the least are the people that do it perhaps the most currently. So, you know, you always see guys who are fairly experienced in terms of what they're doing in the weight room or what they're doing with nutrition. You know, they tend to prioritise that post-workout period because they feel it's going to, you know, add something extra to them. When in reality, you know, they've got a lot of their bases covered by consuming sufficient nutrients over the course of a day. And the ones who need it the most are the ones who don't even know it really exists. So, you know, the people who have no idea or concept over how much food they're consuming over the course of a day, you know, so they would benefit from consuming food in and around the workout period. But there we have it, guys. Anyway, I hope this video has helped. Please feel free to leave your comments and questions below, and we'll get back to you. And until next time, guys, stay strong